We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest trade talk around the Toronto Maple Leafs. Will they make a huge swing and try to go after a player like a Travis Konecny or an Erik Karlsson? We also have some trade talk around the Vancouver Canucks, several signings, further updates yet again on the Alex Galchenyuk arrest situation and being let go by the Coyotes, and Evander Kane is leaving the HDA, and it sounds like there's quite a rift between the two sides. We'll discuss that and everything else coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today, some interesting news stories that we certainly did not expect to get here. Let's start with Alex Galchenyuk. Of course, this is the third time I've brought up this topic. The first time we did the video was when the news first broke that the Coyotes were putting him on unconditional waivers to terminate his contract. At that point, we really didn't know why, what was going on, just that something had happened off the ice. Which they felt they had grounds to do that. Well, then later that day, about 5-6 hours later, there was more reports that had emerged via Katie String of The Athletic, talking about the fact that he was arrested and some of the charges that were facing him. And well, now we learn more again, over more than a full day later, and this part's even more disturbing, to be completely honest, and this probably will solidify the fact that I will be quite surprised if Galchenyuk has another NHL opportunity. At least if he does, it's going to be a while. So not only do we know that he had an off-ice situation, we know that he was arrested, that was involved with a private property hit and run. He was also facing some other charges as well. And it sounds like the new reports say that Galchenyuk was very much threatening the officer or officers on the scene. He threatened to chop the officer. Not quite sure exactly the context there, but it could mean a variety of things. Either way, it's not good. He's alleged to have used a racial slur against one of the police officers as well. He had been quoted as saying a couple of really horrific quotes like, "I will end your bloodline, one phone call and you're dead." He was threatening to cut out the kidneys of the officers' family members. Like, he was really going at an aggressive approach here at these police officers. Not only was he, arrested, and it sounds like he was under the influence. That's what it, kind of stems from. At least that's what it sounds like, and I can't say that with certainty. His father was even around as well. His father was present, and apparently told the cops that he'd never seen his son be so aggressive and act that way. To me, Alex Galchenyuk, he's very likely, I think, facing jail time. And to be honest, I think he needs help in the worst way. Like I said, there's been lots of stories and rumors about Alex Galchenyuk for a long time. I've heard different things. And really, like, a lot of the stuff that I've heard, I never really heard it from a source that I could say was 100%, accurate. It was for sure true. But I'd heard things about things that had happened off the ice in Montreal and other stops along his NHL way. I know there were some fans that certainly thought that when he was in their NHL city that he was, behaving fine and there was no issues that way. And I don't think there's been issues everywhere all the time. But it does seem to be a bit of a history thing, and it seems to be getting worse. Maybe spiraling out of control. Like, this to me does not sound like somebody who should be, out and free. This person needs help. Like, Alex Galchenyuk is, whatever's going on with him, if it's a substance abuse or alcohol, I don't know what his problems are. It just sounds like there's something along those lines that's impacting him, and these are some pretty horrific things that he had to say in this situation, and I think we probably have seen the last of the one NHL rink, but we'll see what the future holds. I just hope for his sake that he gets the help he needs, and whatever that ends up being, I don't know. But and another interesting story today that came from the hockey world, which, again, an off-ice thing, but I noticed probably mid-afternoon or so, close to supper time where I live, there was a statement on social media from Evander Kane. So, of course, when I see a long statement, had to have a read through it. So I'll show you this statement on the screen. Essentially, just to kind of summarize, he says that he has, after careful consideration, he's leaving the HDA. Now, in case you don't remember, the HDA was formed, I think it was 3 or more years ago, the Hockey Diversity Alliance, obviously trying to fight, racism and kind of try to help end racism within the hockey world, and certainly, act as, role models for younger athletes. They're all players that faced racism at some point in their careers, whether it be from, minor hockey, junior hockey, NHL hockey, minor pro, all of us on the way up, right? So the organization had great goals, and I think it's done a lot of good work, obviously. And Evander Kane was one of the founding players within that. So but his statement says that after careful consideration, that he is leaving the group. And now he also goes on to say, if you read through it, he kind of goes, and he then talks about, why they got together, essentially, like I said, trying to fight racism within the hockey world, and some of the work that they were trying to do. He says that, and then he says that one of his biggest concerns all along is now being realized that the HDA is now being led by people with personal agendas, and that they've had a combative approach working with other organizations that have tried to do the same sort of work. So that part was quite surprising, and he certainly made it sound like this was entirely his own choice, entirely his own decision, and that he's stepping away from this group, that he was one of the founding players to help get started. So obviously this kind of caught the HDA by surprise, and they've since put out a fairly lengthy statement here as well, and I'll show you that on the screen. And the HDA says that Evander Kane has not been involved with their organization for about 2 years, that because of the laws in Canada around nonprofit organizations, ever since he went through his bankruptcy, he was not able to any longer be a director. So you can work with a nonprofit, you can't be a director though, of that stature in Canadian law for a nonprofit. Because of that, he couldn't have that type of role. And it also goes on to say here that he hasn't attended any meetings or contributed in any other way. So obviously, basically, ever since his bankruptcy came about, his involvement was kind of cut off. So if he can't be a director, he just kind of stopped doing everything with the organization, according to what they're saying here. They also say that he's expressed interest to rejoin numerous times, but the group felt that he needed to put in more work before that should happen, and that they left the door open for him in the future when they thought that work's been done, and that he was in a better place to be a role model for young athletes. I thought that sounds kind of harsh. Obviously, goes to show you that I don't think they're getting along too well here. It also says that we were surprised by today's statement and unfounded reference to personal agendas, but we wish Evander well and thank him for his role with starting the organization. So certainly that is not something we expected today. Of course, like I said, the HDA's, played a role with trying to help, deal with and eliminate at some point racism within the game of hockey. I did not expect this kind of a huge rift between the two sides here with any individual members, but obviously we know Kane has had a lot of different off-ice issues. I don't know that this is necessarily connected or not, but obviously at this point we can say that Kane is no longer involved with the HDA. He has concerns with their organization, but they don't seem to see that that kind of surprise with his behavior, and basically say that he stopped working with them and hasn't done anything in a couple of years. So it wasn't really his choice to step away. They're the ones that kind of made the choice that they weren't going to let him rejoin, and that he has, kind of needs to show that he's ready to do the work again before they give him that role. I thought that was interesting to see how things have certainly developed in that right. I know the HDA has been disappointed by all the work that the NHL has done, that they haven't done enough to kind of help with their initiative here. And I don't know if there's maybe, because Evander references the fact of there being combative working with other organizations. I don't know if that's a shot of how they've dealt with the NHL or not, or whatever. I do wonder if either side will make further statements or further comments to see about how things are being operated there or what have you. But some interesting off-ice news. Like I said, we do have a bunch of signings today as well. The Buffalo Sabres have signed one of their prospects from the 2023 NHL draft, second-round pick forward into Sweden, Anton Wahlberg. He gets his his 3-year entry-level deal. He is the first pick of the Sabres 23 draft class to sign his entry-level deal. So obviously we'll see some other players likely coming soon, including their first-rounder, Zach Benson, probably as well, I imagine in the near future. Buffalo's also signed Brett Murray. He's been a big part of their AHL team the last while. He gets another 1-year, 2-way deal at $775,000 at the NHL level. The Arizona Coyotes have signed forward Zach Sanford. He gets a 1-year deal at league minimum as well. I believe it might even be a 2-way deal if I'm not mistaken. Zach Sanford goes to Arizona. The Anaheim Ducks have re-signed restricted free agent forward Benoit Olivier Gros. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal as well. Detroit re-signs Wyatt Newpower. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal at $775,000. The Dallas Stars have re-signed Riley Damiani. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal at $775,000. The Kings have signed Jacob Dvorak, who was another 23 NHL draft selection in the second round, left shot defenseman. He gets his 3-year entry-level contract. And the Edmonton Oilers have re-signed forward Raphael Lavoie, who accepts his qualifying offer. Actually, that goes the same for Wyatt Newpower. I believe his QO was accepted as well. But Lavoie gets a 1-year deal, $874,000. Now, some had said that because the Oilers are so tight on cap space, I know there's a lot of Oilers media were expecting this might be a year that Lavoie makes the Oilers roster out of training camp. But that $874,000, it might not seem like much, but every dollar counts, and the Oilers are extremely tight. That could prevent him from getting on the roster. They might need a player at $775,000. I think the Oilers are kind of hoping that he might not accept the QO and that he might be willing to take a little bit less in order to have a better chance to squeeze him on the roster. But that could impact his roster spot. Unfortunately, it really shouldn't, but that's the way that Gary Bettman's salary cap works. Is so tight for some teams that they have to pick players to be on their NHL roster based on what they're making for money, not so much based on their skills and talent. Onto some other trade talk around the NHL. There's still some talk about Vancouver should be a team that we should be paying attention to. The Canucks, to me, have been extremely quiet. This is a team that has been expected to make a lot of moves since Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have taken over, and they have made some moves, but they have a lot more to go. They've been relatively quiet, really, outside of the Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout. Of course, that was a big step in the right direction. They signed Teddy Bluger. They've done some work to their blue line, of course, but overall, like they brought in Carson Soucy. They brought in, obviously, Philip Hronek at the deadline. But in the forward group, which is the main area that they haven't really attacked yet, is they have an abundance of NHL forwards and contracts. Now, of course, they still don't have Vitaly Kravtsov signed. I'm not sure what his situation holds. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he might be going back to Russia. I believe they've offered him his QO so he can be retained. But I don't know that we should expect him to be in the mix for an NHL roster spot on the Canucks this year. They are supposed to be getting back Tanner Pearson. Everything seems to be healing well with his hand, and I think at this point they're aiming and targeting for him to be able to play this year. Of course, Ilya Mikheyev missed a big chunk of last year. He'll be coming back as well. So counting him, they have like 14, 15 forwards. There's been lots of talk about guys like Garland or Besser getting moved out. Not real sure if the Anthony Beauvillier is going to stay long-term or not. And nothing has really happened within this group. I mean, we know that Elias Pettersson it can get a contract extension, so I'll be curious to see where things go there. I wonder how much time he's going to take. Obviously Miller is signed long-term. They got Hughes for a little while yet, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of question marks within the forward group on who stays on a longer-term basis. They really need some cap flexibility. According to Cap Friendly, they're over the cap, and at this point, they could go with a smaller roster, but they're going to be required to play some players on waivers to get down to the compliant levels here. So to me, I'm surprised at this point. We've already been through the NHL draft. We are basically 2 weeks into NHL free agency at this point. So the trade market is still there. We're still getting some trades, but the trade market has certainly slowed down. Teams are slowly filling in all their spots here, and there's going to be a little bit more activity, but not as much as there was a few weeks back, and they haven't done much. So still look for the Vancouver Canucks to try to pull off some kind of cost-cutting trade in the forward group They got way too many, and at this point, they're just going to be forced to place players on waivers in training camp if they don't get something done ahead of time. Now, as I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. There's been a lot of talk through social media around what they're going to do. Some of it from NHL reporters, a lot of it from fans. I see two big names that seem to be popping up in a lot of the Leafs trade talk and rumor mill to some degree is either Travis Konecny of the Philadelphia Flyers and Erik Karlsson of the San Jose Sharks. Now, is it realistic that either could become a Maple Leaf before the start of the season? I suppose it is, but at the same time, neither one of them are going to come cheap. They're going to be expensive deals, but we know Brad Treliving has a lot on his plate that he's working on, and then not only is he working on, maybe changing the group a little bit, but he's got some mega contract extensions he's working on as well with Austin Matthews and William Nylander, and it doesn't sound like either player is in a huge hurry to get their deal done. They know they have a contract for the coming season, and to be honest, they're probably not overly stressed about it. It's more stressful for the team than it is the player for sure. They know they're going to get paid one way or another. And when it comes to Travis Konecny, though, I've seen a lot of talk about him and what it might take to get him out of Philly. I've seen some people suggest trades of TJ Brody on defense, Nicholas Robertson in the forward group, and maybe a first-round pick to get it done. I honestly, as much as you might think that's a good offer, I mean, Robertson's still a decent prospect, a first-rounder for next year, which is probably going to be a low first-rounder because the Leafs are expected to be a good team. And then, of course, you've got 1 year of TJ Brody, which really, that's more of a cap dump than anything else, just trying to make the money work. So I honestly don't think that is anywhere near enough. And it's not to say that Konecny he's a really good player. Is he worth, a whole lot more? Definitely worth a bit more, I think. But to be honest, it doesn't matter what we think he's worth. It's what the Flyers think he's worth. And at this point, I don't think the Flyers are going to move Konecny unless they get blown away by a trade. They need some players to stick around and be veterans there. We know that Ken Atkinson is expected to make his return and play this year. They're hoping Sean Couturier will. I haven't heard much about him, but he's signed long-term as well, so it'd be helpful if he could play and get into back into a leadership role with that team. Obviously, that could be a couple of good news stories right there if they're able to resume their playing careers and be anywhere near the player that they used to be. Ultimately, though, Konecny also a really good player for them and a player that Tortorella really seems to like as well. It was reported before that they won multiple first-round picks before. Around the time of the draft or even before that, that's what the speculated asking price from Danny Briere was for a potential Konecny deal. So at this rate, I mean, they're almost going to have to sweeten the offer for the Flyers to take Brody as part of it, and then you throw in a first and Robertson being the return for Konecny. I don't think that's enough. You're going to have to give them either another first-round quality prospect or another first-round pick. So you're looking at probably 2 first-rounders and Robertson. To me, it might take that, or you're going to have to put in a first-round quality recent draft pick player that's still kind of, not quite in their prime yet. Looking at maybe Timothy Liljegren, for example. I don't know if they really want to pair with him. Matthew Knies, of course, a very bright prospect that they just signed at the end of last year. They're probably not going to really want to part with him, but that would be what they'd ask for. You're looking at Robertson the first, and there's going to have to be a third asset in there, either a first-rounder or, like I said, a recent prospect who would be, equivalent to a first-rounder in that sense. So as much as I think he'd be great, I think Konecny could help a ton of teams. I know, looked around at teams like the Senators, the Flames, who are all kind of, maybe looking for one more player in their top 6, top 9. He could help a ton of teams out there. But the Flyers at this point, they just don't seem to be looking to move them in order to just to move them. They're going to move them for a big return. They're looking for an overpay here, and I just don't know that they're really going to do that. Now, when it comes to Erik Karlsson, I mean, considering how much money he makes, even with the Sharks retaining some salary, you'd have to think that they probably are going to be looking for a guy like William Nylander. To me, I think the only way the Leafs really stand a chance to land Erik Karlsson would be if William Nylander's on the table. We know that William Nylander and the Maple Leafs are way apart on contract negotiations. We're going to be somewhere between 1.5 and $2 million. Now, could they end up bridging the gap and getting something done closer to $9 million, which is what the team was hoping for? anything is possible. Until the contract signed or he's traded, I'm not going to rule out any possibilities. But at the same time, Karlsson being such a big name and a high salary, even with retention, even he's making over 11.5. So even if you knock that down with salary retention on San Jose's part to close to $8 million, that's still a hefty salary to add to an already inflated Leafs salary cap situation with a lot of forwards making a ton of dough. So a guy like Nylander almost certainly would have to go. Now, would it be a Nylander for Karlsson 1-for-1 type of deal? I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how San Jose would feel about it, but they want to sign William Nylander and give him big money long term at the stage of his career. Does that make sense for him? I don't know that it does. I mean, he could certainly be a star player because I think for William Nylander, one of the things that he wants to be is a front line, top line star player on any team he's on. And I think he feels he can often be that in Toronto. So, but San Jose are trying to slowly shed themselves of all these longer term deals and kind of heading more into rebuild mode here. Nylander's not old, but he's getting into the later part of his 20s now. Does it make sense to ink him to an 8-year deal, let's say $10 million? I mean, for him to go to California and be, a big-time player, but not be on a great team, is that going to be what he wants? I don't know. Nylander also has a modified no-trade clause where he can block trades to 10 teams. We don't really know what teams those would be because we haven't really had that many significant rumors about where he would want to go if he did leave Toronto. We know at this point negotiations are not going well. There's tons of speculation, tons of rumors, but we haven't really had any leaks about what teams he may block versus not. Now, Erik Karlsson also has a full no-move clause, so if he doesn't want to go to Toronto, he won't be. I mean, obviously he's got a home in Ottawa still. His wife's from there. It's not that far from there, so would he want to do that? I don't know. I mean, it's been rumored by a lot of sources out there, a lot of reporters say that Karlsson's preferred destination right now is Pittsburgh. Is that absolutely the case? We can't really say with certainty, but I can understand why it would be appealing to him. But whether or not that's where he ends up, I don't know. I do think Pittsburgh might have a better chance of doing the deal than Toronto just because they wouldn't be forced to move out such a high-profile player who is looking for a new contract making big money. That would be complicated. But I've seen a lot of people suggest that online, Nylander for Karlsson, because both two big money players who may not be, in the same team next year. We know Karlsson wants to move. We don't think Nylander wants to, but might have to if Toronto refuses to pay him. So is it logical that the Leafs could land either of these players? I don't think the odds are great in either case. If I had to place a wager, I'd probably say the odds are better on Konechny, just because it's not going to be as expensive a deal as Karlsson, and in that sense, it's a smaller contract, not quite the star player of a Karlsson. You wouldn't necessarily have to move Nylander in that case, so it might be easier by all accounts, but interesting nonetheless that seems to be all the rage on Leafs social media accounts and fans and reporters talking about what they might do. We know Brad Treliving at this point hasn't really made a big stamp on the team with his time as GM here being brief so far this summer, but be curious to see how he handles these situations and what roster he ends up taking in to next year. Let me know your thoughts on the Leafs down in the comments, as well as the other news we talked about today down as well. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.